Hello everyone and welcome to the Art of Teaching Art. I'm Mrs. Darby and today I'm going to show you how to draw a pencil drawing of a landscape. Now this is a drawing that I completed previously from a photograph I've taken. I really loved the source of light in the photograph and how that kind of glanced onto the fence and onto the trees and kind of grasses, and I liked how I could build up the textures with dark and light tones to create all of the different details that I could see in the landscape. I really like this view with a slice through the landscape, and I'm going to be completing this box here on this page, again in pencil, just from a different image, so I can show you how to explore different images. And one of the things to remember when you're doing this is you're not necessarily drawing every single detail, you're giving the impression of details and making sure you've got the range of tones, the softness of the lines where you need them, and that will all work together to build up to create your drawing. So things you will need: I've got some pictures here that I'm going to work from. I think I'm going to work from this one because I like the detail of the fence and the signpost. And then I've got a selection of pencils here and a rubber. Now it's up to you how you start this off. You can draw it out freehand or you can do a graphite transfer. I'm going to draw it freehand and I'm going to show you how I do that. So let's get started. So first up, I'm drawing the image out. I've placed it right next to it so I can see where the lines are. I'm using a ruler to draw in some of the lines and just getting the basic detail. I will alter these slightly as I work into the image later on. Now I'm starting on the sky. So this technique is to cover the whole sky in graphite first with pencil, and then once that's complete nice and evenly, I use a rubber to remove some of the graphite. So that's a really good technique with landscape drawing. Put graphite down and then remove some of it with a little rubber or a larger rubber according to where the light source is. So just adding in some darker areas with that as well. Now I'm just working on the next area. So I'm just shading in the lighter and darker areas for that first layer of bushes. So just doing general shapes, noticing where the highlights are, and then I'm doing little curved lines to add the texture in there. So this is a mixture of using tone as a base layer and then working in with the detail. So again, I'm doing the same here. So I'm laying down a base layer of graphite and then working on top with the mechanical pencil to add little dashes to create the darkness of the grass. So I've already added the tone and then I'm using the mark making on top of that to create the texture of the grass. And this really helps to kind of develop the use of tone and mark making within your work. Just adding a bit more detail to the bushes, adding the curved lines to give more detail to the leaves, and starting to draw out where the tree is. So I've got the size of it a little bit wrong, but I think that that's fine. And I'm just using a dark pencil to fill that in with the little dashes. So again, I'm covering the whole of this next area of grass with pencil, just to fill it in, making sure that it's not a perfectly straight line at the top of that. And then now moving on to add the detail. So first of all, I'm laying down the general tone of the pencil that I'm adding, and then I'm working on top of that to add more detail. So make it darker at the bottom if it's darker, leave areas of highlight available if there's highlights, and I'm always using that end of the rubber to add some of the highlights on, making sure that it's got that detail there. So using the ruler now to draw in the fence panels, I want these to be nice and straight, and then shading the areas around it's those dark areas because the fence panels are very much lighter than the rest of the image. So just finishing that off with a sharp 6B pencil, I think this is, but a 4B would work. Now I'm working on the front of the bush, so I'm shading in the darker and lighter areas first of all. So that's a base layer. So just shading that in first in the shapes that I can kind of see in the bush, the shadows that I can see. And then working on top of that. So now I'm adding the grass at the very front of the piece, the foreground, to add some of the leaves and texture there. And then working back into the bush behind. So I'm adding the darker areas yet again. And then working on top with the mechanical pencil to add slightly curved lines, the mark making, to add the detail to the bush. I will then use a rubber to remove some of the lighter areas. So that's what I'm doing now, just using a rubber to remove some of the lighter areas to just get that highlight glancing off the bush. So just working on the next bit, adding again texture to the bush there. So I'm using a similar type of mark again, and then using the rubber to remove some parts of it. So it just gets that glances of highlights in some areas. That contrast of light and dark is really important. I'm adding a little bit more pencil, and I'm using a blending stump over the top of that grass in the centre there that was quite blended to just blend everything together. And I'm using that in selected other areas to blend them together. Not everywhere, just selected areas. Just adding a few more details with the mechanical pencil and we're done. And there we are, my finished picture of a landscape. So I've got a range of tones, a range of textures and mark making to recreate this image. And I think this is a really good way to explore the different techniques that you can use when drawing landscapes in pencil. Thank you so much for watching and have a really great day.